Chapter 41 University starts. You are listening at novelfold.audio. On October 18, 1900, the first admissions examination for the Australian National University, which was well known to everyone after publicity, officially began. Because of the nature of the Australian National University in cultivating talents needed by Australia, the content of this admissions examination is also related to 5 majors. There are 5 papers in the 5 majors. Each major is selected for admission, and only the ability is considered and nothing else is considered. This can effectively screen out students who are talented in various majors, instead of being like later generations who seem to be taught everything but actually learn nothing. What Australia needs now is a professional talent, not a so-called college student who is involved in all aspects but actually knows nothing. Arthur has not read the questions jointly set by the teachers, but Arthur can tell from the mood and conversations of the candidates during the 2 days of the exam that this professional exam is far from as simple as it seems. Because of the huge number of papers, Arthur urgently mobilized a group of teachers and educated officials to work overtime to correct them. Finally, after more than 10 days, all the papers were marked and the results were tallied. November 2, Sydney, in front of the Australian National University. Thousands of candidates are waiting anxiously around the gate of the university. Some of them may be excited, some may be restless, but they all look at the gate of the school expectantly. For them, they don't have to worry about choosing a major, because after passing the professional examination, each major will admit them based on their scores. But it just so happens that if they are not admitted to majors with better performance, then it is conceivable that they will be admitted to majors with poor performance. Soon, the university teachers came out with a bulletin board full of names and placed it in the most conspicuous position at the school entrance. Everyone, the admission list for each major of the Australian National University is here. You can check carefully to see if your name is on it, but no noise is allowed at the school gate. All students who are admitted will officially enroll in 3 days, and those who are not admitted will not be admitted. Don't be discouraged, the next admissions period will be in September next year, and you can apply then. After a few brief introductions, the university teachers returned to the campus. And those candidates hurriedly walked to the bulletin board, trying to find their names on the bulletin board. Time passed quickly, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. The successfully admitted candidates have been waiting impatiently at the school gate, hoping to enter the campus they have dreamed of for a long time. Those who were not admitted would go back dejected on the same day. After all, the free accommodation provided by Arthur for these candidates is only until the end of the exam, after which they have to pay for their own stay in Sydney. Not long after, the university's gate was successfully opened, and a total of 800 freshmen officially entered the campus of the Australian National University amid cheers. Arthur was currently on the highest floor of the campus. Looking at these students in their prime, Arthur smiled with satisfaction. All expenses incurred by these more than 800 freshmen at the university are provided by Arthur, including room and board and various tuition and fees. As long as he adds a few ideological education courses to the university, Arthur can guarantee that these college students will become his loyal supporters and his most loyal team. Another advantage of these young people is that they are more forward-thinking and can accept and support any reforms Arthur makes in Australia. And young people are often passionate, and they can also influence their families and hometowns. With the graduation of batch after batch of passionate college students year after year, in the future, Australia's bottom elite and middle elite will be in Arthur's hands. Of course, the opening ceremony is indispensable for the beginning of school, not to mention the opening of the first class of students of Australia's first university. Arthur attached great importance to this opening ceremony, and even dispatched the guards to take care of the etiquette. The purpose is to fill these college students who have just entered college with enthusiasm and devote all their spirits and thoughts to their loyalty to the country and Arthur. The opening ceremony began with Arthur's speech, in which he reviewed Australia's history from the colony to the present independent country, promoted his own achievements, and reiterated his goal of making Australia rise. Then he focused on encouraging these young people and officially announced the establishment of the scholarship. Under these combinations of punches, these college students who have just entered school are like new wives getting off the sedan chair, and they can only be at the mercy of others. Then came the speeches from the president of the university and the deans of various majors, but Arthur had no interest in listening to the chatter of these old guys and left early. Although Arthur only attended the entire opening ceremony for less than an hour, the sensation it caused was indeed huge. The reforms and policies implemented by Arthur in Australia are remembered by all Australians, especially these young men who are over 18 or 19 years old. Because they have no experience in society, they are very easy to be influenced by public opinion and have blind opinions on a person. Good intentions and bad intentions, driven by the media controlled by Arthur has become a perfect monarch in the hearts of these young people, the savior who saves Australia from fire and water. Encouraged by Arthur, one can naturally imagine the enthusiasm and impulse these young college students can unleash. It is precisely because of this that the semi-military management pursued by the university goes very smoothly. Although nearly 11 hours are spent studying every day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., except for meals and breaks, no student has any complaints and everyone is devoted to studying. Among the mighty team, in order to enable these precious college students to master sufficient abilities instead of just talking on paper, Arthur specifically allowed each major to have an opportunity to practice outside once a week, and asked all departments to cooperate with the practice of college students. For students majoring in mechanics and architecture, this is a hard job. After all, Australia's industry is under construction, and there is a lot of hard work such as physical labor and equipment transportation that no one is doing. These college students with a little experience happen to be perfect candidate. Although it is a bit suspected of being a coolie, a lot of knowledge can be learned through practice, so none of these college students objected, but they all looked forward to the weekly practical activities. Arthur was also happy to do this. And the industrial department was eager for these students with a little foundation to replace those workers with no foundation, so this matter was settled. First update. Please support. Please vote, collect, read, comment, and invest. Chapter 42 Queen Victoria is critically ill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Following the opening of universities, there are also basic education schools in Australia, that is, primary schools. Compared with universities with relatively strict admission requirements, Australian primary schools have very low admissions requirements, or even basically no requirements. Compared with university, basic education does not require expensive tuition fees. And Arthur has exempted half of it, so Australians are still happy to let future generations receive basic education. More importantly, compared to universities with relatively high investment, the investment in primary schools is basically zero except for teachers and textbooks. Even an ordinary middle school graduate can barely become a primary school teacher. Under such circumstances, the cost of opening a primary school has been infinitely reduced. The construction cost of primary schools in Australia is only equivalent to that of an Australian national university. On October 21st, Arthur once again embarked on a journey to the Isle of Wight. More than 4 months have passed since the last trip to the Isle of Wight. Under Arthur's management, Australia has begun to develop vigorously and order has basically stabilized, but at the same time, Queen Victoria's body was also gradually aging. Although it was longer than the 3-month lifespan previously stated by her personal doctor, it was true that the lamp was running out and she would not live long. This time the person who notified Arthur was Crown Prince Edward, who came all the way from England on a warship. Seeing his uncle again, Crown Prince Edward seemed to be a different person compared to the depressed state a few months ago. His face was shiny and he was very happy, although Queen Victoria's bad news made Prince Edward lose his smile. His inner satisfaction and relaxation were also revealed involuntarily. Arthur, long time no see. After seeing Arthur, Crown Prince Edward patted Arthur's shoulder hard and said with a smile, "Yes, uncle, I haven't seen him for more than half a year." Arthur nodded calmly, thinking about Crown Prince Edward's intentions. "How are you doing in Australia?" Crown Prince Edward smiled and asked. "Very good." Arthur nodded. The atmosphere was a bit awkward, but the good news was that they soon arrived at the port of the Isle of Wight. The warship slowly docked at the port, and Crown Prince Edward and Arthur also disembarked. This time there was no one to greet her. Everyone was busy taking care of Queen Victoria, and there was really no manpower available. "Let's go, Arthur, go see your grandmother." Crown Prince Edward chuckled twice and walked straight towards Queen Victoria's manor. Entering the manor, Arthur smelled a strong medicinal smell, accompanied by the pungent smell of disinfectant. The servants in the manor were so busy that some of them did not notice the arrival of Crown Prince Edward and Arthur. Some did, but were told by Crown Prince Edward not to bow. quickly walking into Queen Victoria's room. The room was already surrounded by Queen Victoria's descendants. Queen Victoria was smiling and talking to all her descendants. Seeing Prince Edward and Arthur walking in, Queen Victoria's eyes lit up and she quickly said, "Arthur, come to Grandma." After hearing Queen Victoria's words, everyone quickly made room for Arthur so that he could easily come to Queen Victoria's side. "Arthur, good boy, how have you been in Australia recently?" Queen Victoria held Arthur's hand tremblingly and asked with a smile. "I'm fine, Grandma. You don't have to worry about me. With the guards here, I'm the safest in Australia." Arthur responded with a smile. That's good, child. I'm so sorry for you, my good boy. Australia is a poor and impoverished land, and you have suffered there." Queen Victoria touched Arthur's forehead skillfully and said, "Mother, since everyone is here, how about we eat first? These little guys must have been hungry for a long time, so why don't we talk after eating, okay?" Princess Beatrice met Victoria. The Queen was in a very good mood and asked quickly, in recent days, perhaps due to both physical and mental illness, Queen Victoria's appetite has become worse and worse, and she can barely eat 2 slices of bread and a glass of milk every day. Queen Victoria was in a much better mood after finally seeing her this time, and Princess Beatrice also wanted the Queen to have a good meal. Seeing the Queen nodding, Princess Beatrice quickly ordered the servant to bring lunch. Because the room cannot accommodate so many people eating at the same time, most people have to go to the restaurant next door to eat. Seeing that Arthur was about to leave, Queen Victoria quickly pulled Arthur and said, "Arthur, let's have a meal with Grandma today, okay?" That looking at Queen Victoria's hopeful eyes, Arthur really couldn't say anything to refuse, so he could only nod his head vigorously. Queen Victoria's lunch was very simple, because it was difficult to digest, so the staple food was a portion of mashed potatoes and milk, as well as a few pieces of stewed beef that was already very soft. How is life in Australia? There is not so much delicious food, especially when Australia can only barely maintain food self-sufficiency. Queen Victoria asked while stirring the mashed potatoes in the bowl. Fortunately, Grandma, Australia's cultivated area is quite large. Even if the population is larger in the future, it will be completely affordable. Although the food types may not be that rich, it is completely enough for me. That's right. In a remote area like the Isle of Wight, although New Zealand's animal husbandry is relatively developed, most of the basic food supply still relies on the support of the British mainland. If Australia didn't have any specialties, I would really like to eat it every once in a while. I'll give you something sometime. Arthur said apologetically. I heard that you founded a university in Australia some time ago. How is the progress going? Do you need support from the UK? Queen Victoria asked tirelessly. Very good, Grandma. In view of the number of students and teachers in Australia, the university only enrolls 800 students each year. This year's enrollment has ended and the university has officially started operations. So far, the establishment of the university has been very successful. To be conservative, after 3 years, the university will be able to train at least 800 outstanding college students for Australia every year. These college students will enter all walks of life in Australia and accelerate the development and construction of Australia. Speaking of the achievements of the university, Arthur basically said, still satisfied, in this era when universities are basically small, the Australian National University, which enrolls nearly 1,000 students every year, is already considered a relatively large university. Although the current teaching quality of the university is not high, the college students it can teach are completely sufficient for the development and construction of Australia. Second update, please support. Queen Victoria's era was about to end and Arthur's was about to begin. Please support, collect, comment, invest, read, and support. Chapter 43 Kaiser Wilhelm II. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After hearing that Arthur had built Australia in an orderly manner, Queen Victoria nodded with satisfaction and then began to eat lunch. Perhaps because she was in a good mood, Queen Victoria almost finished the mashed potatoes that she couldn't finish, and even drank most of the juice. after a simple lunch, everyone gathered around Queen Victoria again and chatted with her. Perhaps the happiest thing in life is to be able to stay with your loved ones at the last moment. At least now, Queen Victoria's face is full of smiles, and she no longer looks as sick as before. In the afternoon, another distinguished figure came to the island, that is, Emperor Wilhelm II of the German Empire. Although Germany is currently in a state of competition with Britain, and each participates in military groups against each other, but in fact, the relationship between William II and Queen Victoria was not very tense, and could even be considered warm. On the other hand, Prince Edward's relationship with William II has become worse and worse because he has gradually mastered political affairs. Arthur also successfully met his cousin. It has to be said that the relationship between European nobles is really complicated, and Arthur's relationship network can even reach most of Europe. New book barred, because there were so many nobles and officials who came to visit Queen Victoria. Arthur, except for chatting with Queen Victoria for a long time at the beginning, could only wander around the Isle of Wight for the rest of the time. Although White Island is only about 4 square kilometers in size, it is a beautiful island with an active volcano. The most attractive thing about the Isle of Wight is the hot springs and fountains that can be seen everywhere. Lying in the warm and comfortable hot springs and looking at the beautiful scenery around you, people can't help but relax and immerse themselves in the beautiful scenery. However, Arthur was not in the mood to go to the hot springs now, so he just walked around the Isle of Wight alone. The reason why there are no guards is because after Queen Victoria took up residence, there were 2,000 royal guards stationed on the island. In addition to the manor being heavily guarded, there are also many guards patrolling everywhere on the island. Naturally, there is no need to worry about the security issues on the island. The middle of White Island is filled with smoke. That's because the active volcano is still accumulating energy and waiting for the next eruption. Since Queen Victoria and Prince Albert lived on White Island, the volcanic island has experienced dozens of eruptions, large and small. Although each eruption is not enough to cause serious harm to White Island, the frequency of volcanic eruptions is still relatively high. Frequently. New. Arthur, what, are you interested in this volcano? Suddenly, a strange voice came to Arthur's ears. Arthur turned around and saw that it was William II who he had met for the first time this afternoon. What? Don't you recognize me? My cousin Arthur. William II chuckled and cleverly came to Arthur's left side, also leaning on the railing. His Majesty the Kaiser. Arthur saluted. Don't be so distant, Arthur. I'm your cousin, you can call me Cousin William. William II patted Arthur's shoulder with his right hand and said with a smile, speaking of which, we haven't met each other properly yet. After a few meetings, it was only through this opportunity that I was able to meet him. New. Cousin. Arthur suddenly thought of a certain lady and instantly felt a chill. I deeply regret what happened to Uncle Arthur before. Because the domestic government affairs were relatively busy at that time, I didn't catch up with Uncle Arthur's funeral. Arthur doesn't mind. William II gently moved his body in a very metaphorical manner. Turned a little so that he could better cover his left arm. It doesn't matter, Cousin William. As a monarch, domestic matters are more important than anything else. Arthur nodded. Arthur, what do you think of Germany? William II suddenly asked. Germany? The Germans are a great nation, and Germany is a great country. Although the time of unification was short, it is now a powerful country integrating industry, military and economy. The gap between Germany and the old powers is almost very small. Small, except for the colonies, Arthur said matter-of-factly. I have to admit that the unification of the German Empire was indeed short, but it did take only such a short time to grow into a powerful country integrating industrial economy and military. Needless to say, Germany's industrial strength is natural. Its steel output ranks among the top 3 in the world. Although it is not as good as the United States, which has the strongest industry, it has slightly surpassed the United Kingdom. In terms of military affairs, the German army is undoubtedly the world's #1 army. The Navy is also catching up with the United Kingdom. Its comprehensive military strength is definitely among the top 2 in the world. Looking at the old power France, although its vast colonies continue to provide nutrition, France has completely lagged behind Britain and Germany in terms of economy and industry. If all French colonies are handed over to Germany, then Germany is very likely to directly impact the world's most powerful country. This is also the reason why a direct conflict broke out between Germany and France. France has been declining day by day, but it still occupies the second largest colony in the world. Although Germany is powerful, the scope of its colonies is very low among the great powers, and the total value of its colonies is even lower than that of the Dutch Southeast Asian colonies. Under such circumstances, it is normal for the Germans to be dissatisfied with the division of colonies and their old neighbor France. Haha. Hearing Arthur's very sincere words, William II smiled and said, "That's right. What Germany currently lacks is the foundation and market brought by a large number of colonies. But a large number of colonies around the world are being occupied by Britain and France. Britain is okay. As the world's largest power, it is natural to occupy so many colonies. But France has declined, and it is no longer qualified to enjoy so many colonies on its own. It is better to join us in resisting the old powers. Be in the camp, Arthur." Australia's geographical location is very important and can have a big impact on France's African and Asian colonies. If you are willing, Germany can provide you with complete sets of industrial equipment and a large number of immigrants to help you in the future. Within a year, we will establish a complete industrial system and quickly become an industrial power. Arthur was secretly surprised. He did not expect William II to choose this opportunity to win over himself and the whole of Australia. At present, the confrontation in Europe has become increasingly serious, and conflicts continue to break out between the two major military groups. The arms race has exhausted all countries in the two major military groups. First update, please support. Chapter 44 Treaty between Germany and Australia. You are listening at novelfull.audio. To be honest, if Arthur hadn't known about what happened to Germany, Arthur would have simply agreed to William II conditions. Although there is a large amount of equipment from the UK, if Australia wants to build a systematic industry, it will definitely take 10 years, but with Germany's help, this time can be shortened infinitely, and Australia's industry can even undergo earth-shaking changes every year. From an industrial point of view, Germany definitely has the strength to compete with the United Kingdom. Even if it has the same number of colonies as Britain and France, Germany's industrial strength can even compete with the United States. Seeing Arthur's hesitation, William II continued to smile and said, "If Arthur thinks this is not enough, Germany can also provide Australia with low-interest loans of more than 500 million marks, and send industrial experts to station in Australia to help you build the entire industrial system." 500 million marks is almost equivalent to £25 million, which is considered a considerable sum of money. More importantly, after Germany lost World War I, the German mark would suffer a crazy devaluation. The current 500 million marks are worth £25 million, and the 500 million marks in the future may not even be worth £500,000. If the loan is postponed for 20 years before repayment, wouldn't it mean that Germany gave Arthur more than £20 million in vain? Cousin William, although I am very moved by your proposal, you also know that Australia is an agricultural country with a vast territory and a sparse population. We are very backward in industry and economy, and I am afraid that we cannot help Germany. Arthur said with a smile. Although Germany's conditions are very exciting, it is still a bit too simple to want Australia to enter the vortex of World War I based on such conditions alone. Of course, Arthur. Once the war in Europe starts, most of the French army will be concentrated on the battlefields of Europe and Africa, including their fleet. You only need to harass their African and Asian colonies, constantly just destroy them. The great German army will defeat them on the frontal battlefield, no matter how many people they have. William II said with a bit of pride. William II indeed had the confidence to say such a thing. Just like the British Empire's well-deserved number 1 navy, the German Empire also deserves its number 1 army position. Whether it is the individual quality of soldiers or the comprehensive military strength of the army, there is a big gap between the third capital and Germany. Cousin William, if we join your camp and go against France, Australia can't do anything. but if we just support you secretly and pose a small threat to France, we can still do it. Arthur said with a smile, but you also know that Australia lacks everything, and even if we wanted to do something for Germany, we don't have the ability to do it. I hope that in addition to industrial and financial support, artillery and warships, Germany will also give Australia support. In return, with the support of Germany, Australia promised to choose the opportunity to destroy France's African and Asian colonies when the war started, attracting the attention of some French troops. Very well, Arthur. I'm glad to see you siding with me instead of like Uncle Edward. I thought that with our blood ties, Germany and England would be good allies. But I didn't expect that. Uncle Edward insists on siding with France, so I can only say sorry to Grandma Victoria. William II nodded with satisfaction and said to Arthur with a smile. Knew that, because of his blood relationship, William II was relatively close to Britain at the beginning, but due to the gradual rise of Germany, it has naturally formed an opposition to Britain. Even if William II wanted to make up for the rift with Britain, it would be of no use. Cousin William, I hope that aid from Germany will arrive in Australia soon. At least before the European War, Australia must build a complete industrial system to help Germany in the war. Arthur did not care about William. The second prince said with a smile at Crown Prince Edward's complaint, with free aid like Germany's, Arthur will naturally feel more at ease the sooner he gets it. As for future loan repayments, they may cost less than a fraction of the current loan. No problem, Arthur. I promise that your industrial equipment, financial support, and talents will arrive in Australia before Christmas. But I hope that the relationship between Germany and Australia can be hidden for the time being. It is best not to have this matter with anyone mentions it. This way Australia can deal a fatal blow to France at the critical moment and achieve the best effect of this treaty. William II laughed and said nonchalantly, for Wilhelm II, this support was only a drop in the bucket of national expense, but if it can be exchanged for Australia's serious damage to the French colonies during the war, then even if these conditions are doubled, it will be very worthwhile for Germany. After all, most of France's economy and raw materials come from the colonies. Once the colonies are destroyed and threatened, it means that France's economy and industry face a huge threat. No problem, Cousin William. Arthur agreed quickly. Originally, Arthur was still hesitating about how to speak to get William II to agree not to publicize the relationship between Australia and Germany. Judging from the current situation, even with Australia's full support, Germany has no hope of defeating Britain and France. Once Australia was pulled into the whirlpool of Germany and became a defeated country in World War I, it would run counter to Arthur's plan for Australia's rise. Australia can participate in World War I, but it must be the victor in World War I. In this way, Australia can pursue its own interests and establish its own sphere of influence in the South Pacific after the end of World War I. As for the artillery and warship construction technology you requested, I allow you to introduce it to Germany. As for what technology you can purchase, it depends on the ability of your diplomats. William II said with a smile, many of Germany's more famous technologies are in the hands of capitalists who have established military factories and shipyards. Although many of these are factories specially provided by the government, it is not as simple as William II's words to get them to spit out their own technology. Of course, Cousin William. We are also very sincere in introducing German technology. I will send a diplomatic mission to Germany after we return. Arthur said with a smile, second update, please support and vote. Chapter 45 Conversation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The negotiation with William II went smoothly, which made Arthur feel much better because of Queen Victoria's critical illness. Seeing that Queen Victoria could no longer hold on for a few days, no matter how deep the relationship between Arthur and Queen Victoria was, they had to consider Australia's future. After losing the asylum and support of Queen Victoria, they basically lost the support from Britain. Although Crown Prince Edward has a good relationship with Arthur on the surface, he will never put a lot of effort into helping Arthur and Australia rise. Although Arthur has a handle on Crown Prince Edward, if such a handle is made public, not only will the status and reputation of Crown Prince Edward be greatly affected, but even the status of the British monarch and nobility, as well as the status of monarchs around the world, will be greatly affected. Impact. Born in the British royal family, to a certain extent, Arthur is a member of the British royal family, and both prosper and lose. Once the status of the British royal family suffers a severe impact, Arthur's legal status in Australia may also be affected. After all, although monarchy is still the mainstream in European countries, in fact, democracy and liberal trends have had a huge impact on the monarchy. New idea, compared with publicizing these evidences and handles, using these evidences and handles to obtain sufficient benefits from Crown Prince Edward is a more appropriate solution, but on the other hand, after obtaining enough benefits, Arthur will naturally turn against Crown Prince Edward. Although it will not break with the British Empire, at least during the reign of Crown Prince Edward, Australia wants to be close to the British Empire. Cooperation is impossible. After both achieved their more satisfactory goals, William II and Arthur were in a happy mood, so the already beautiful and moving scenery of the Isle of Wight became even more outstanding in their eyes. Arthur, what do you think of the current situation in Europe? Now that the confrontation in Europe has become clear, do you prefer our Three Kingdoms alliance or the so-called St. Petersburg military agreement between France and Russia? On the way back to the manor, William II suddenly asked Arthur. The situation in Europe? Arthur was stunned, but continued to answer, judging from the current confrontation, I think the strength of the two major military groups is almost balanced. France and Russia have a large amount of land area and population, while Germany it has a strong army and advanced industry. I think if a short war breaks out, the advantage will be with Germany. But if the war lasts for a long time, the advantage will gradually be transferred to France and Russia. This is actually the original historical answer. Although Germany fought bravely in the early stage, after the war turned into a war of attrition, its foundation was completely inferior to Britain, France and Russia, three countries with vast territories and large populations. New, especially when maritime transportation lines are interrupted, even if Germany has a huge industry, it will stagnate due to lack of raw materials. Arthur, you have underestimated one thing, and that is the strength of the great Junker nobles and the German army. No matter how large the land areas of France and Russia are, they will never be able to sustain the crazy attack of the German army. Once when the war breaks out, all German armies are confident that, just like the last Franco-Prussian War, they will quickly capture Paris and end this war quickly. William II laughed and directly overturned Arthur's view. The war that William II referred to was the founding war of the German Empire, which was also the famous Franco-Prussian War. The Franco-Prussian War started with France, and it took less than 2 months for Napoleon III to personally lead the army to surrender. Even if a revolution broke out in France and continued to resist Prussia, Paris was still captured by the Prussian army's successive attacks, forcing the French government at the time to sign a humiliating peace treaty. This war directly defeated the Second French Empire, leading to the outbreak of revolution in France and the establishment of the Third French Republic. It also recaptured Alsace and Lorraine, which were originally occupied by France and had rich coal resources, and forced France to pay a large amount of compensation. As a result, France fell behind other powers during the Second Industrial Revolution and lost the power of Central and Western Europe. The dominant position was completely overtaken by Germany. This is also the reason why William II is confident. The German army captured Paris with overwhelming force decades ago. So now that Germany is more powerful, why not achieve this great feat? It can be said that because of physical defects since childhood, William II has a character of inferiority and arrogance, and because he single-handedly kicked out the iron-blooded Prime Minister Bismarck from the German political arena, Wilhelm II gained a huge voice in the German political arena. All Germans were imagining defeating France in a short time after the war started. Who could have imagined that this war would last for several years and directly defeat the arrogant German Empire? Cousin William, maybe what you said is right. But France and Russia are both powerful countries that dominate a corner, but apart from Germany, the Allied powers can barely match the strength of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I am not very optimistic about Italy's performance. Italy has a direct regional conflict with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Although it is covered up by the larger conflict with France, who can guarantee that France will not give in exchange for Italy's defection? Arthur said with a smile, reminding William II does not mean that Arthur wants to support the Allies. A Europe that fights more fiercely is also good for Australia. The situation in World War I will only become clear after the United States decides to join the war. Before that, the two major military groups have their own victories and defeats, and the war is relatively balanced, so why can't the person rocking the boat be Australia? Giving Australia 10 years to develop, Arthur was confident that he would build a good industrial system and even have the ability to directly affect World War I. The status of a neutral country and a victorious country after the war is very different. Especially during World War I, there were a lot of money-making plans. These old powers have been sucking blood colonies for hundreds of years. Why can't Australia be allowed to suck them for a while? Where's the blood? Maybe, Arthur. But we don't expect anything from Italy. They only need to remain neutral in the war and not fall to the side of France and Russia. Germany will have the confidence to defeat France in a short time and end the war completely. For an extremely conceited and extremely confident obsessive, it was impossible for William II to be persuaded by Arthur so easily. Of course, Arthur did not want to persuade William II. What is more important for Arthur and Australia now is how to obtain benefits from the two major military groups to enable Australia to develop rapidly. First update, please support. Chapter 46 Queen Victoria's Will. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By the time Arthur and William II returned to the manor, it was already past 4 in the afternoon. Knew that it is no longer a secret among high-level officials in Europe that Queen Victoria is critically ill. Therefore, many high-level officials from various countries came to express their condolences to Queen Victoria. The port of the small Isle of Wight was actually blocked. By the time Arthur saw Queen Victoria again, it was already past 5 in the afternoon. During this afternoon, hundreds of high-level officials from various European countries, royal families, and descendants of Queen Victoria had brief chats with Queen Victoria one by one, taking a detailed look at Queen Victoria's life. She made a huge contribution to the British royal family and the United Kingdom, during Queen Victoria's reign. Britain became the world's largest country, established an empire on which the sun never sets, and ascended to the throne of world hegemony. In the hearts of all British people, Queen Victoria is an irreplaceable great monarch and a witness to the British Golden Age. Unseen by the public, people can be seen spontaneously blessing and praying for Queen Victoria in the British mainland, various colonies, and even in every corner of the world. At the end of her life, this old man who worked hard for the British royal family and government was recognized by all British and even most Europeans. Compared with noon, Queen Victoria's complexion was much worse. She even breathed rapidly and her chest kept rising and falling. The most obvious difference that can be felt is that there are not many doctors and nurses in the room at noon, but in the afternoon, the room is already crowded with doctors and nurses. Perhaps aware of her physical condition, Queen Victoria began to shout something anxiously. The people around him listened carefully and finally heard Queen Victoria's cry. "Arthur! Arthur! Go to Arthur quickly! Your Majesty wants to see Arthur! Hurry up!" Everyone conveyed Queen Victoria's order. At this time, Arthur had arrived at the manor and was slowly walking towards the room. After hearing everyone's anxious shouts, Arthur was startled, quickened his pace, rushed to Queen Victoria's room in a few steps, and knocked open the door. "Arthur!" Seeing Arthur pushing the door open, Queen Victoria's dim eyes suddenly lit up and she called, "Grandma, I'm here, Arthur is here." Arthur stepped forward quickly and grabbed Queen Victoria's hand hanging in the air. "Arthur, Grandma loves you. Please forgive Grandma, but the prestige of the British royal family cannot be damaged, otherwise everyone will be in dire straits. I have told Edward to let him pay you another compensation and help Australia build industry. Arthur, live a good life with the wishes of your father and me, and don't think about the past, okay?" Queen Victoria held Arthur's hand tightly and spoke every word with difficulty. "I understand, Grandma. Don't worry, Arthur has never blamed you, Grandma." Arthur nodded quickly and said, "That's good, child. Your father is my favorite son, and you are also my favorite grandson. Arthur, I know you have your ambitions, but they also have to go through a long period of accumulation, right? Queen Victoria using his last strength, he touched Arthur's forehead skillfully and said with a smile, "No. I understand, Grandma. Stop talking and have a good rest. When you recover, we can have a good chat." Arthur said reluctantly, feeling the weakening strength of Queen Victoria's hand. "It's okay, kid. Go get Edward," Queen Victoria continued. Crown Prince Edward was already waiting nearby. Seeing Queen Victoria mention his name, he quickly knelt down in front of the bed. "Edward, no matter what, Arthur is your nephew, isn't he? He has lost his father, and will soon lose his grandmother. Protect this child, this is my last request to you." Queen Victoria looked at Edward, speaking of. "Yes, mother. Don't worry, as long as I am here, no one will touch Arthur." Crown Prince Edward nodded quickly and said, "All the entourage and guards I brought will be given to Arthur after my death, including their families." Queen Victoria said, British New Guinea was handed over to Australia for management, and Britain gave up all sovereignty and management rights. At the same time, appointed Arthur as the governor of New Zealand for a term of 20 years. No one may revoke the governorship in any way. After 20 years, according to the public opinion of New Zealand, it will be decided whether to stay in Australia or return to the United Kingdom. This, yes, mother. Crown Prince Edward hesitated in every possible way, but in the end he had to agree to Queen Victoria's order, because he saw the cannibalistic look in Queen Victoria's eyes. If he dared to say no, then Queen Victoria's will might have a clause that would pass the throne to someone else. This caused an uproar. You know, British New Guinea and New Zealand together cover hundreds of thousands of square kilometers of land. What's more, these two areas are very close to Australia. If Australia completely controls these two areas, then Australia will be the natural overlord in the South Pacific, and no one can reach in. As for what Queen Victoria said about appointing Arthur as governor of New Zealand for 20 years, in everyone's eyes, she actually gave New Zealand to Arthur for free. After allowing Australia to control New Zealand for 20 years, can New Zealand still be able to outrun Australia? Edward, I want you to promise that the British Empire will not launch any action related to Australia within 20 years, even if it is a diplomatic threat. And the British Empire will provide Australia with various support, including military means, within 10 years, recognize and guarantee that Australia is a completely independent country. During this period, various supports of at least £5 million per year must be provided to Australia, and immigration to Australia must not be stopped under any excuse. Queen Victoria continued. Prince Edward had no choice but to continue to promise Queen Victoria, once these commitments are implemented, Australia will not have to worry about any foreign enemies within 10 years, because the British Empire will provide support as soon as possible. As for Crown Prince Edward's failure to fulfill his promise, in the presence of political figures and royal families from most European countries, if Crown Prince Edward really betrays his promise, he will instantly lose his prestige both among the top leaders of various countries and in the hearts of the British people. And credibility. Queen Victoria's purpose was very simple, which was to make Prince Edward make a promise in such a public place without giving him any chance to resist or refuse. Second update, late, sorry. Also please support. Chapter 47 Death of the Queen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Arthur was very moved. In the last stage of her life, what Queen Victoria cared about and missed was not the British Empire that she had managed for her whole life, nor the many descendants who surrounded her, but Arthur. New Book Bard. Queen Victoria devoted all her love to Prince Albert. After losing Prince Albert, Queen Victoria turned all her love to Duke Arthur. After losing Duke Arthur again, Queen Victoria transferred her love to Arthur intact. Perhaps Queen Victoria had huge mental and physical problems due to the loss of her husband and son one after another, but no one can deny that Queen Victoria's love for Prince Albert, Duke Arthur, and Arthur was so pure, so single-minded. At this time, everyone's eyes were focused on Arthur. Everyone knows that, except for Queen Victoria, Arthur has become the protagonist today, and is even about to become the most eye-catching nobleman in the world in recent times. Don't underestimate the influence of Queen Victoria. In addition to the original history, it was precisely because William II held Queen Victoria's hand tightly in the final stage of Victoria's life. This made the British people generally have no good impression of Germany. I have a good impression of William II, and if William II hadn't been obsessed with defeating France and challenging the British Empire in sea power, maybe everything would have turned around. Now, Queen Victoria gave priority to Arthur during the important stage of making her will, and Arthur was always by her side, under such circumstances, who would dare to reject any conditions that Queen Victoria promised to Arthur in the future. According to Queen Victoria's huge prestige in the UK, coupled with Arthur's tragic background of losing his father and grandmother, even Crown Prince Edward has to weigh whether he can bear the consequences of threatening Arthur. After giving orders to Prince Edward, Queen Victoria looked at Arthur again, tried her best to maintain a smile, and said, "I will hand over British New Guinea and New Zealand to you, and I hope you can manage it well. These two areas, combined with Australia, create a strong country, and you no longer have to worry about any dangerous situations. Grandma may not be able to accompany you in the future, Arthur, you have to go on well, Grandma will watch you in heaven." "Grandma, don't say that." No matter how mature Arthur was in his heart, he was already moved to tears when faced with this situation. He could only hold Queen Victoria's hands tightly, showing that he was complicated and entangled. "My child, don't cry. You are the Duke of Australia. You are an outstanding nobleman that I am proud of. No matter what situation you face, don't cry, okay? You have to remember that you still have millions of people waiting for you. His management and rule cannot be like this in front of them." Queen Victoria smiled and wiped away Arthur's tears and said softly, the next step was for Queen Victoria to formally confirm her will. At this stage, Arthur had been confused and had not listened to all of Queen Victoria's will. Fortunately, at this stage everyone can listen together, and at the same time, there will be dedicated people recording it to prevent any tampering with the will. It wasn't until Queen Victoria finished speaking all her will that Arthur gradually came back to his senses. Looking at Queen Victoria, whose strength had been exhausted, Arthur was moved and reluctant to give up, but death was not something ordinary people could stop. Queen Victoria's condition is getting worse and worse, and everyone understands that maybe today is really the last day. "Arthur, Arthur," in the silence, Queen Victoria's weak cry seemed so hoarse. I'm here. Just tell me, Grandma, Arthur is here." Arthur quickly shook Queen Victoria's hand harder and responded. "Live well, Grandma, and your father will pray for you in heaven. Arthur, you are a good boy, Grandma is proud of you." Queen Victoria's eyes gradually dimmed, and she squeezed out a few words with her last breath. "Albert, Arthur, here I come." It's over, it's all over." Queen Victoria, who had held the British throne for 63 years and controlled the Indian throne for 24 years, was extremely important to the British government and the British people, and who single-handedly created the Victorian era of the British Empire, said goodbye to everyone. The moment Queen Victoria's hand completely fell off, Arthur understood that he had lost his grandmother who loved him most, and the future of Britain might really have nothing to do with him. "Mother! Grandma! Grandma! Your Majesty!" The panicked and heavy shouts all represented the mood of everyone present. When everyone rushed forward and even pushed Arthur to lie down in front of Queen Victoria's bed, Arthur gradually realized that everything was so incredible and everything was so real. "Okay, everyone. No one wants to see Her Majesty the Queen leave, but at least Her Majesty left with a smile and without any worries or distress. Pray for Your Majesty, everyone, don't speak loudly here. Shout." William II stood up and said to everyone. Although it is understandable that everyone is sad and devastated by Queen Victoria's departure, in this situation, if everyone continues to howl like this, it seems a little disrespectful to Queen Victoria. "Everyone, we are all reluctant to leave Her Majesty the Queen, but this is not something we can decide. Her Majesty's departure is a happy one. She is accompanied by all her children and grandchildren, and she has fulfilled all her wishes. But Her Majesty the Queen's departure is a happy one. It is heavy and unacceptable for everyone, the entire British royal family, and even the entire British Empire. I suggest that countries carry out some activities to commemorate Her Majesty the Queen, and that countries fly flags at half-mast for a week to commemorate Queen Victoria. Crown Prince Edward will not let it go. In this case, William II stole the show, so he continued, judging from the status of Britain during the Victorian era, it is completely acceptable for major European countries to fly flags at half-mast in memory of Queen Victoria. The reason why Crown Prince Edward said this was on the one hand to highlight the status and power of the British Empire, and on the other hand to metaphorically remind William II that although William II is now the emperor in the aristocratic hierarchy, his status is the most noble. But don't forget that this is still British land for the time being, and he, Edward, will soon become the King of Britain and the Emperor of India. First update, please support. The Victorian era has come to an end, and the next step is to develop with peace of mind. Chapter 48 Return to Australia. You are listening at novelfold.audio. October 24, 1900 was the first day after Queen Victoria's death. As early as yesterday afternoon, after the Queen stopped breathing, someone was responsible for collecting Queen Victoria's body and transporting it back to the British mainland for burial, although the place Queen Victoria most wanted to stay during her lifetime was the Isle of Wight. As the monarch of the British Empire and the Queen respected and admired by all British people, Queen Victoria's body will eventually be buried in the Royal Cemetery in the UK. The transportation of the remains is very difficult. It takes at least half a month to sail from the Isle of Wight to the British mainland. If you add in the time spent on supplies along the way, the time may become even longer. In order to transport Queen Victoria to the British mainland as early as possible, Crown Prince Edward ordered the accompanying battleship HMS Renown to take charge of the transportation operation. HMS Renown is one of the fastest warships in the Royal Navy. The voyage from the British Empire to New Zealand can be compressed to just over 20 days, while the UK was busy transporting the remains of Queen Victoria. Royal families and senior officials from other countries had no reason to continue to stay on the Isle of Wight. Everyone said goodbye to each other, then got on the warship and returned to their country. The only one among these people who had some friendship with Arthur was William II. Before William II left, he specifically called Arthur elsewhere, and the two chatted for a while. William II was very surprised by Queen Victoria's care and love for Arthur. Originally, when Queen Victoria was dying last night, William II wanted to stay with his grandmother and brush up the favorability of the British, but I didn't expect that it was precisely because of Arthur that he, a man who was regarded as the emperor, did not get close to Queen Victoria last night. However, Wilhelm II did not mind this and only reiterated the cooperation treaty between Germany and Australia. After all, anyone with a discerning eye can see that after Queen Victoria handed over British New Guinea and New Zealand to Arthur, Australia would become the most powerful country in the southern hemisphere, with no rivals in the South Pacific and the eastern Indian Ocean. The only British Empire that could compete with Australia, at the request of Queen Victoria, not only did Edward, who was about to become king, agree to a non-aggression treaty, but also promised to protect Australia as an independent country for 10 years. In 10 years, if Australia has the dual support of the British Empire and Germany, it will definitely be able to completely absorb the power of British New Guinea and New Zealand. Coupled with Australia's mainland, even the British Empire will be able to create this alone. The behemoth is helpless. However, William II was still happy to see this happen. After all, Germany basically had no interests in this area, except for a piece of German New Guinea, but in fact, neither British New Guinea nor German New Guinea had a large population. Even New Guinea as a whole had a population of just over 1.4 million. In William II's mind, it would definitely be acceptable if German New Guinea could be exchanged for the integrated and powerful Australia's support for Germany in World War I. If Australia before integration could only harass French colonies in the rear, then Australia after integration would have the ability to threaten French colonies in future wars, and even annexation of some remote areas would not be a problem. Take France's French New Caledonia, for example, which is very close to Australia. If a conflict breaks out between Australia and France, can France hold on to this area? You must know that the logistical costs brought by distance are tens of times higher. The logistical costs required by France to defend this area may far exceed the value of this area. Therefore, William II's intention to win over Arthur was even more obvious, and he even specifically promised to arrange support for Australian industry after his return and speed up the pace of cooperation between Germany and Australia. The reason why William II was so eager was because before Queen Victoria's death, she specifically ordered the British Empire to provide at least £5 million of support to Australia every year for 10 years and not to cut off the source of immigrants. This would bring Australia, which had already broken away from the United Kingdom, closer to the United Kingdom, and would not be in the interests of William II. In order to win over Arthur, William II decided to launch a German immigration plan to Australia. As long as most of Australia's population are Germans, wouldn't Australia's policies be subtly biased towards Germany? Arthur didn't know William II's inner thoughts, but even if Arthur knew, he would only smile slightly. If you want to change Australia's demographic structure, then at least Germany must immigrate at least 4 million people to Australia, such a huge number, let alone 10 years. I am afraid that Germany will not be able to immigrate to Australia in 20 years. In the past 2 decades, Australia has been able to attract millions or even tens of millions of immigrants from all over Europe and even the world. It is even more impossible to change the entire immigration structure. There is only one way to turn most Australians into Germans, and that is to only introduce immigrants from Germany in a short period of time. But Arthur is not stupid. Although the German population has a relatively high literacy rate and generally has a relatively high level of education. But after all, an immigration country like Australia must ensure the advantages and proportion of the main ethnic group. Although Arthur is willing to accept immigrants from other countries, that will only happen if the proportion of Australians headed by British people remains above 50% of the total population of Australia. A country of immigrants needs diversity, but according to the right to speak, it only needs one. In order to prevent future immigration from causing many problems, we can only increase the proportion of the main ethnic group. After bidding farewell to William II, Arthur also set sail for Australia on a warship. However, what was different from when he arrived was that there was no Crown Prince Edward around Arthur, but there were 2,000 royal guards and hundreds of entourages. Needless to say, the royal guards are the elite troops of the British Army. Including Arthur's original possessions, the size of the guards will reach 4,000, and Arthur's status will be more stable. It was not without intention that Queen Victoria gave these entourages to Arthur. After all, Arthur was an outsider in Australia. Although he had successfully gained power and won the support of most Australians, he still had to guard against some things. In addition, Arthur has lost all his power in Britain. If Arthur wants to recruit more loyal followers, it will be theoretically very difficult. After all, no one can guarantee the loyalty of the newly recruited followers, but these followers of Queen Victoria are different. Most of them have served the British royal family since childhood and are extremely loyal to Queen Victoria. After Queen Victoria gave these entourages to Arthur, their allegiance became Arthur. These people were much more loyal than the entourage Arthur had worked so hard to recruit in Australia, and they were more experienced in serving people and serving as subordinates. Second update, please support. I wrote more, please support me. Chapter 49 Crowds at Sydney Port. You are listening at novelfull.audio. October 26, 1900, Sydney Port. After more than a day's journey, Arthur finally arrived in Sydney from the Isle of Wight with more than 2,000 troops and entourage. Transporting more than 2,000 people is not an easy task, and Australia's weak navy alone cannot do it. William II simply saw Arthur's plight before leaving and dispatched a transport ship from German New Guinea to transport all these people to Australia. Sydney Port. At this time, Sydney's port was already crowded with welcoming crowds and officials. After several days of news spreading, the whole world has learned of the departure of one of Britain's greatest monarchs, Queen Victoria. Arthur's deeds will be known to the world along with Queen Victoria's will and last-minute instructions. At this time, all the people in the port came to greet Arthur. Queen Victoria's last few words were spread by major newspapers and were known to all people around the world. The words "you have lost your father and are about to lose your grandmother" moved many people. The reason why these Australians chose to stand at the port to greet Arthur was actually to express an attitude. Australians will always stand behind Arthur, and Australia will always be Arthur's backing. Don't underestimate Queen Victoria's prestige in any part of the entire British Empire. And don't underestimate Arthur's prestige in Australia now. it is precisely because of the combined prestige of Queen Victoria and Arthur, as well as Queen Victoria's last-minute instructions, that the British began to sympathize with Arthur, and sympathized with this man who was also born in the British royal family and who was not yet an adult and was forced to go to Australian boy. Australians have different feelings towards Arthur. They have personally experienced Arthur's various welfare policies, and they are also the only beneficiaries of the tax cut policy. They have accepted and recognized, and even respected Arthur, the new ruler, and believed that he was a truly outstanding monarch who could lead Australia to rise and make Australians proud. Under such circumstances, some passionate Australians came to the Sydney port involuntarily. They wanted their monarch Arthur to know that Australians would always love Arthur, and Australia would always be Arthur's backing. In short, perhaps Queen Victoria's final instructions were just an expression of true feelings and had no additional purpose, but these heartwarming words indeed made Arthur win the favour and sympathy of all British people, and made most Australians choose to stand together to support this benevolent lord, as soon as the warship approached the port. The cheers of the crowd in the port had already entered Arthur's ears through the thick steel plate. Arthur was stunned. He did not expect that at this moment, so many people gathered at the port, and they were all shouting hard. As we stepped off the warship and stepped onto the port, the crowd's shouts became louder and louder, to the point where the birds in the sky had to flap their wings and flee. Long live your highness! Australians will always be with his highness. Long live his highness! Although the crowd's shouts were very messy, Arthur could still hear a few relatively unified words clearly. After hearing the shouts of the crowd, even Arthur, who was in a very heavy mood, had to be moved by it. Facts have proved that the various policies implemented by Arthur in Australia are not fruitless. In an era when this kind of monarchy is still rampant, a monarch like Arthur who is kind and loves his people is bound to win the love and loyalty of most people. The moment Arthur got off the warship, Prime Minister Evan came up with all the cabinet members. Everyone saluted Arthur one after another, and then persuaded Arthur to mourn. Prime Minister Evan, what is this? Arthur pointed at the crowd surrounding him and looked at Prime Minister Evan with a questioning look on his face. Your Highness, this was not arranged by the government. After hearing about the death of Her Majesty the Queen, these people spontaneously came to greet and express condolences to Your Highness. Prime Minister Evan explained with a smile. Okay, let people disperse. Everyone has work to do, and there is no need to gather here. Tell everyone, I will not fall because of setbacks, and Australia will not fall because of setbacks. We have won with support from the UK, the country will only develop faster. Arthur waved his hand, signaling for the crowd to disperse. Although thousands of people are welcome here, it is very impressive, but in fact, Australia is currently in a stage of rapid development, and most of these people are employed. If just to welcome Arthur, your work cannot be completed, or you are directly late for a day, then the gain is not worth the loss. Your Highness, some people say that we want to manage British New Guinea and New Zealand. Is it true? At this moment, a question suddenly appeared in the crowd. Oh. Arthur looked at the source of the voice, which was a young man who looked like he had just grown up. What's your name? Arthur asked with slight interest. Although many Australians participated in the cheers, there are still very few people who dare to face the loud questions like Arthur, and almost never seen it. Harry Murray, Your Highness, William Henry Harry Murray. The boy replied. Oh. Arthur was a little dumbfounded. He didn't expect that anyone he met randomly in the crowd would be someone who was somewhat famous in later generations. Harry Murray, or William Henry Harry Murray, was an Australian soldier during World War I and, during World War II, generally described as the most decorated British soldier. The honour received by William Henry Harry Murray was the Victoria Cross proposed by Queen Victoria. How difficult is it to obtain this medal? From its birth date in 1856, it has been issued more than 1,300 times until later generations. Among them, after the end of World War II, it was only issued 13 times until later generations. This medal was originally created by Queen Victoria to reward heroes in the Crimean War, and eventually evolved into the highest honour for British soldiers. It is the highest medal that all British soldiers dream of receiving. Being able to receive this medal alone is enough to show that William Henry Harry Murray's contribution and achievements in the First World War are not insignificant. Good name, Harry. It's true. Her Majesty the Queen handed British New Guinea to Australia, and made me the Governor of New Zealand. British New Guinea will become part of Australia in the future. Arthur nodded. Speaking of, hearing what Arthur said, the surrounding crowd immediately burst into cheers. Nothing makes people feel happier than a country expanding its territory, let alone expanding its territory peacefully without spending a single soldier. First update, please support. Chapter 50 Australian New Guinea. You are listening at novelfold.audio. After hearing what Arthur said, everyone present fell into revelry. Even the cabinet officials who have reached the top levels of the government are all smiling. Everyone wants to see the country peacefully expand its borders, let alone lands very close to Australia like British New Guinea and New Zealand. British New Guinea is located not far north of Australia and has a population of approximately 700,000. The value of this land is not very high, and the population is not very large, but it can become an important northern gateway to Australia and a springboard for exploring Southeast Asia. To the west and northwest of British New Guinea was the Dutch East Indies colony. The development potential of the Dutch East Indies colonies cannot be underestimated, with a total area of nearly 2 million square kilometers and a total population of more than 20 million. More importantly, these people in the Dutch East Indies were so-called indigenous people, that is, slaves who were not regarded as human beings by Westerners. As long as you can seek an island in the Dutch East Indies, you can obtain a large amount of free labor and can also be used as cannon fodder for Australia's industrial development. In Arthur's view, the greatest role of those who cannot integrate into Australia's diverse culture and become true Australians is to devote their lives to the development of Australia. Needless to say, New Zealand is naturally not as prosperous as Australia in various mineral resources, but it is still an excellent country in terms of animal husbandry, which can just make up for Australia's shortage of available arable land. If Australia can fully integrate New Guinea and New Zealand, it will not be a problem for the integrated country to accommodate even hundreds of millions of people. It has to be said that even at the last moment of her life, Queen Victoria fought for a lot of benefits for Arthur and Arthur's Australia, giving Australia the capital to rise and the potential to become a superpower, but for Britain, Queen Victoria's departure was a pure loss. As a queen who has ruled the country for more than 60 years, Queen Victoria's prestige in Britain is unmatched, and the monarchic power she has obtained cannot be matched by Edward, who is about to succeed her. It can be said that when Queen Victoria was willful, she could remove and appoint the Prime Minister according to her own intentions without worrying about being criticized by the government and the people. But if Edward dared to do this, then the next day the streets would be full of news accusing Edward, and there would be demonstrations against the tyrant all over the empire. After all, the United Kingdom is still a constitutional monarchy, and the power of the British monarch is still greatly restricted. Even if someone like Queen Victoria can take back a certain amount of voice from the government by virtue of her long-term accumulated prestige and the advantage of winning the hearts of the people, after the throne is replaced, these temporary rights cannot be transferred to the new monarch. Inherited, Crown Prince Edward has two headaches in a short period of time. One is to handle Queen Victoria's funeral, not only to satisfy the royal families of Europe and the British royal family, but also to satisfy the British people who love Queen Victoria. At the same time, Crown Prince Edward still has to communicate well with the government. After all, the government that Queen Victoria can suppress, Prince Edward may not be able to suppress. However, Arthur was not aware of Prince Edward's worries. After settling the guards and entourage presented by Queen Victoria, Arthur held a cabinet meeting the next day to discuss how to take over British New Guinea and New Zealand. According to the agreement with Crown Prince Edward, after the Australian soldiers arrive, all British soldiers and forces will evacuate from British New Guinea, and British New Guinea will be officially handed over to Australian management. As for whether to turn it into a new Australian state or continue to be a colony, that is a headache for Australia. It is precisely because of this that Arthur decided that it would be better to take over British New Guinea as soon as possible. With the remaining prestige of Queen Victoria, it is very easy for Australia to completely control and take over British New Guinea, but if Queen Victoria's prestige gradually dissipates after Queen Victoria's funeral is over or even longer, it will be hard to say whether British New Guinea will be willing to accept Australian management by then. It was still the familiar conference room on the top floor of the Government Affairs Building, and there were still a few familiar people in the cabinet. Arthur sat at the top and smiled and posed a difficult problem to everyone. According to Her Majesty the Queen's last will and testament, British New Guinea was handed over to us, and I have been the Governor of New Zealand for 20 years. Now is the time. It's time to discuss the issue of British New Guinea and New Zealand. How should we manage these two areas? Everyone, please share your views. Fortunately, British New Guinea is already a sure fish for Australia and basically has no chance of running away, but New Zealand is different. Arthur has only been the Governor of New Zealand for 20 years. If Australia's policies are biased against New Zealand, it is very likely that Australia will lose the right to manage New Zealand in 20 years, causing New Zealand to return to the embrace of a United Kingdom. Your Highness, why not just rename British New Guinea to New Guinea as our seventh state in Australia? Agriculture Minister Henry suggested. British New Guinea is very close to Australia and also has excellent ports. If we directly turn it into a state, there will be no problem, just like our previous colonies changing states smoothly. Well, that's a good idea. Does anyone else have any ideas? Arthur nodded expressionlessly and looked at the others. Your Highness, I feel that we cannot use New Guinea as our new state in a short period of time. We should first manage it as a colony. Prime Minister Evans stood up and put forward different opinions. British New Guinea and our Australia different from several states. Although British New Guinea has a population of more than 700,000, there are only more than 30,000 British and European immigrants, and the rest are local indigenous people. If we directly take British New Guinea as our new if they are managed by a state, where will these indigenous people go? If they are all counted as our legal citizens, is it too unfair to all of us Australians? Prime Minister Evans' meaning is simple. If British New Guinea is directly regarded as a state, then the disposal of these indigenous people will become a thorny issue, but if British New Guinea was still a colony, then who would care about the life and death of the natives in the colony? Your Highness, my proposal is to continue to manage New Guinea as a colony. What we need now is the Australian New Guinea colony, not the state of New Guinea. Prime Minister Evan looked at Arthur and said solemnly, second update, please support.